Welcome to configuring storage on your Alces Flight Compute cluster. Before we get started, you'll need to have a compute cluster launched on AWS, and you'll need to have SSH access to that environment. So once you have your Alces Flight cluster up and running, you're going to want to send it some data, some information to help you run your jobs. The simplest way to do that will depend on what type of client system you're accessing the cluster from. If you're accessing from Linux or a Mac machine, you should be able to use the inbuilt SCP command to transfer data using the SSH protocol. You're going to need the IP address of your cluster in order to be able to log into it. So you can either use the AWS CloudFormation console to get that, or you can run the command alces about node. That will return the public IP address for your login node for the cluster. If you get that IP address, I'm then going to move to my local Linux system, and here you can see I've got a data file that I want to send across. In order to send this data file from a Linux or a Mac client, I can just use the SCP command. So SCP, the file name, and then my account name and the IP address of the cluster login node. The system will prompt me to confirm because this is a new environment. I've not logged into this cluster before, so I can press yes to accept that fingerprint, and then the system will begin transferring the data. I'm transferring this across a wireless network, so it takes a few seconds to transfer my 64 megabyte file. I'm logging into the environment using my SSH key. My Linux workstation has this SSH key built in, so it didn't prompt me for a password to transmit this file data. If you have a key stored in a different location, you can also use the -i parameter. That will allow you to add a particular key file to do the transfer. So this command here is equivalent to the one I just ran. For users that prefer to use a graphical user interface to transfer their data, you can also use a tool such as WinSCP to transfer files backwards and forwards from the cluster. In the hostname box of WinSCP, enter the IP address of your cluster login node. In the username box, enter the username that you configured your cluster with. Press the Advanced button, and then under the SSH menu, select the Authentication tab. Select your key file that you created your cluster with and press OK. Pressing the Login button will connect you to your cluster login node. The system will prompt the first time that you connect to the cluster to make sure that you're ready to accept the cluster's SSH fingerprint. Once you've logged in, you'll see a graphical interface that allows you to transfer data backwards and forwards. Here's the data file that I transferred from my Linux machine. I can copy that back to my Windows desktop by clicking the Download button, selecting a directory to put that in, and pressing OK. WinSCP is available for both Windows and Mac users and is a useful accompaniment to manage data transfer backwards and forwards to the cluster. Alces Flight Compute can also be used to connect to object storage environments, either using the S3 protocol or using a third-party service like Dropbox. To enable new environments, use the Alces Storage Enable command. Use S3 to enable S3 and use Dropbox to enable the Dropbox plugin. To configure a new S3 environment, use the command alces storage configure, the name that you want to call your S3 environment, so I'm going to call mine my S3, and the type of environment, so S3. The system will prompt you for the display name for this configuration, your S3 access key, I'll just paste mine in, and your S3 secret key. You'll be able to get both of these from your Amazon account or if you're using an S3 configuration with Ceph, your Rados gateway account. In the service address column, enter the service address that your storage provider has given you. For AWS S3, this will be the default here. If you're using a Rados system, it will be the host name of your local Rados gateway server. Finally, use the Alces storage use command along with the name of the configuration you've just entered. From there, you can do an Alces storage ls command to list the contents of your S3 area. To list a particular bucket name, just add the bucket name after the ls command. To get files onto the cluster, you can use the Alces storage get command. Let's make a new directory and get the job scripts from a particular bucket in S3. You can use the -r parameter to recursively get all objects within a particular bucket. The system will list each of the scripts that you get and download them to your local cluster environment. To put data back into S3, use the Alces storage put command. Enter the name of the file that you want to transfer to S3 and then the bucket that you want to put the file into. Users with a Dropbox account can also configure the cluster to talk to that. Use the Alces storage configure command again, enter a new configuration name, I'm using my Dropbox, and select the type as Dropbox. Enter a name for your configuration and the cluster will print an authorization URL. Select that URL and load it into a browser session on your desktop. Log into your Dropbox account as normal. Dropbox will then show an authorization permissions page. Click the Allow button to allow your cluster access to your Dropbox account. Press return on your login. The system is then configured with Dropbox. Use the Alces storage use command with the name you just set for the Dropbox account. You can then use the Alces storage command to list the contents of Dropbox. Alces storage commands can be used interactively on the command line or can be embedded into job scripts, allowing you to upload and download data as part of the jobs that you run in your cluster. You must remember to store your data securely in either S3 or Dropbox, or transfer it off the cluster using the SSH methods we looked at earlier, before shutting down your environment and deleting it on the AWS console. That concludes this video. Please watch the other videos in the series for more information about using your cluster and running applications through the job scheduler. To find documentation online, just go to our website, alces-flight.com, click on the documentation link. That will give you all the printed documentation for using the system.